All right, I want to talk about your third project, and this is going to be an introduction. So we're going to go through a breakdown of the separate assignments that comprise the third project, which is called the Graphic Mark Pattern and Applied Design um, project. And so essentially, it's going to be similar to making a logo, but we're not going to call it a logo because a logo is something that you would make with really specific criteria that is for a specific company. You would already have, like the mission statement, the value statement, all of those things would be put together and ready for you. What we're going to be doing instead is figuring out first, before you get into the specifics like that, how to think more generally and how to think more abstractly about mark making. A logo is nothing but a mark, and there's some different ways that you can kind of classify or categorize logos, which we'll talk about in a separate lecture. But in general, a mark is going to be something that we're going to be making it's abstract. So and it's going to be based on some concepts, and I'm not going to be like giving you a company or something like that where you have to go and make a logo. And one of the reasons that we do this is we try to get you to think about things that are abstract and figure out how to create a concrete graphic that would represent that, and that's a lot harder than you might think. So that's going to be the assignment. So let's start by looking at this. It's project 3. As of this recording, this could be different if it's a different semester, but as of this recording, the entire project represents 35% of your grade, so it's pretty significant. And like I said, could be different if it's a different semester, but I will notate that if it is. Let's take a look here. If you look at the different phases of the assignment, you'll see that there are 4 different phases. We've got phase 1, which is called concept mapping. That is a discrete assignment. It's worth 15 points out of the total 100 that are available for project 3, because you'll see that these are all grouped inside. If I collapse that and I open it back up, you'll see that they're grouped all inside of this graphic mark pattern and applied design project. So the first one is concept mapping, where you're going to be coming up with a concept. I'll talk about that in a minute. Next one is going to be phase 2, which is the drawing and iterative mark design portion, and that is worth a significant chunk of points. It's worth 40 points. All right, so oops, I didn't mean to do that. The third phase is modularity and pattern, where you're going to start to break your mark apart to be able to create other collateral that you can use, specifically on how to use the pieces of the mark to make patterns. And then the last phase for this particular assignment, or for this project, is going to be the assignment called color inspiration sampling and assignment. And when I say assignment, I don't mean like, I'm assigning you, something that's for a grade. When I say assignment, I mean basically designation. So it would be color inspiration, color sampling, and color designation, right, or color assignment. So let's take a look at each of these separately. The first one that you're going to start with is required. It's worth 15% of the third project, and it's critically important. All right, and so this is sort of a full project overview right here. That basically I explained to you, that some companies, nonprofits, other brands, they don't have tangible projects and services from which, to draw literal translations, visual translations. And so it's your job as a graphic designer to help envision a good communication mark to convey the meaning of that brand, and its culture, its values, and what it delivers to consumers or patrons, right? And that can actually be very difficult, like it's a little bit maybe easy to just jump from point A to point Z if, somebody is telling you that they make, automobiles, for instance. Some people might think that the job that they have is to do something that looks like an automobile. Well, that's not what we're doing. We're not being literal like that. It's really easy to try to be literal. This is going to be harder because you're going to have to think abstractly. Okay, and so the assignment focuses on distilling an abstract idea into like a meaningful visual mark. And Also, you're going to be investigating like how the grouping of objects and color assignment significantly contributes to implied meaning, right? So how do those things all contribute to what it is that we're understanding when we look at that logo, or in this case, I'm just calling it a mark. So we're going to be talking about some technical concepts throughout the project, like grid, vector geometry, color schemes, and Pantone matching system, or PMS color, which is also referred to as spot color. We sort of touched on that a little bit in our color study. I sort of addressed that in the lecture, but we're going to get into a lot more in depth here, and also web color identification, and we're going to talk about pattern making. So the broad topics from which you can choose, and I'll blow this up, for this first assignment, okay, is this list right here. All right, you can't really navigate outside of this list, but this is a very all-encompassing, pretty large list. So you would choose one of these categories, right? Either security or protection, travel or exploration, nature or the outdoors, sporting or adventure, technology or communication, like performing arts or entertainment, finance or commerce, or like children and family. Okay, so you would only choose one. So it's 1 through 8, and you can kind of use, like if you were to, for instance, choose number 5, technology or communication, you could choose one or both of those as your starting point, right? Children, family, again, you could use one or both of those words, but it's sort of in the same category, right? So, but these are broad topics that can be, kind of abstract concepts that you're going to have to figure out how to represent with a mark. So it's not like I said before, it's not like I'm giving you some company and I'm saying, here, make a mark for it, or some organization. You're coming up with a mark that's going to represent sort of this abstract stuff. Now, to do that though, you're not just going to immediately start drawing based on, children and family. You're going to do something called mind mapping. So this is the first assignment of Project 3, and it's worth 15% or 15 points of the whole project. So to get started, one of the first things that you're going to need to do, if you look at the instructions, is you have to read this PDF. All right, it's called Free Logo Design Love PDF chapter, and it comes from a book that was recommended to you for this class called Logo Design Love. It's a great book, but it's not required. What's really wonderful is that the author provided this chapter free from the book, and it's one of the most important chapters, I think, in getting started, and it teaches you about using a mind mapping technique, which is going to be required for this assignment. So, and it tells you right here, you're going to get a blank piece of paper and a pen or a pencil. I don't want you to do this digitally, just start with your pen and pencil so that you can write stuff out, spontaneously without having to type. And you're going to write the initial word in the center, and you're going to circle it. And then you're going to draw out 6 short lines in a radial fashion around that word. You can do more if you want, but at least 6. And then you're going to write words that you associate with the first one that's in the middle, okay? And then after you write those 6 words, circle those words. And then off of each one of those, you're going to draw 2 shorter lines, or 2 short lines, off of each of those 6. And you're going to basically repeat the last step where you come up with words that you associate with that word, right? And so you end up getting into this kind of deep network of concepts, and you're going to repeat this, just follow these instructions, so that by the end you're going to end up producing about 42 words that branched off of that initial concept, like for instance family and children, or technology and communication, right? And you're going to have like 42 other words that kind of ended up being like a less literal, right, and very likely a stronger association, so that you can make a visual representation of the original concept. So you're going to select that word, one of those words, and you're going to define the word. So that's called a denotation, the definition. And you're going to actually literally go look up the definition, and you're going to write it down. And, and then, so for instance, if you started with the concept of protection, for instance, you might have ended up with an associated word like umbrella, you know, in one of the branches. So the next thing you would do is you'd write down all the definitions of that word as you would find it in the dictionary. Highlight the parts of the definition that you feel resonate the most with the meaning that you're trying to convey. All right, and this is called the denotation, as I mentioned before. Right, next thing you're going to do is you're going to write connotations of that selection. So, like after highlighting those key parts of the denotation or the definition, you can think about how you can visually represent those concepts and try thinking, you know, of the implied associations that you would have with those words. Those are called connotations. All right, and then, you know, for instance, if we stick with the example of umbrella, right, like we were talking about before, you might end up with connotations like cover, shield, shelter, safeguard, something like that, right? You can also look at the thesaurus if you need to help you along in this process. So you're going to write down at least 6 of these connotative words to help you as a guide in your design process. Okay. And then you're also going to go and, you know, figure out some image resources. So go look at some pictures that are going to help you visualize your word. And when I say image resources and I say visual symbols, I don't necessarily mean go find like clip art, right? I want you can go find photographs. That's ideally what I'd like for you to do. And look on the internet or things like that. You can do internet searches for imagery. You can also take your own photographs if you would like to do that. You know, you can find physical objects that you think might be a good basis for representing these and take pictures, right? So you need to collect 6 to 8 images from which you can draw some of your ideas. And then you're going to document all of this research and you're going to upload it. And the template that you have to use, all right, it's not an option, you have to use this template, is this phase 1 documentation template, right? And you're going to download this. It's an Illustrator template. You'll open it up and then you'll use that to start putting your stuff into it. And I'll show you some examples of other student work so that you can see what it is that I'm talking about. And then you're going to upload it to this discussion board, this phase 1 concept mapping discussion, and to turn it in, right? And so let's take a look at some examples real quick. Okay, so in this first example, all right, this one, the original topic, you can see, I'll zoom in a little bit. The original topic was exploration. And so this student, this is how theirs ended up looking, their mind map. And you're going to be required to take a photograph or to scan the work that you do with your pen and pencil. And that's going to end up being a picture that you put inside the documentation. There's a place for it. And then the single word selection from the mind map that they chose was the word science. Okay, and if you look up here, as a reminder, the original was exploration. And then they define science, it's a noun, and they give the definitions, and then they wrote down some different connotations: study, observation, learning, research, and so on. They wrote a lot more than 6 to you know, find that helpful. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Let's go back up. There we go. And then these were the photographs that she ended up finding that she found to be kind of helpful in her research. Okay. All right. And so that's it. That's the first part of that assignment, is this, you know, this sort of double page documentation. And it's laid out with artboards for you so that you can just plop your stuff into the artboards. And so let's take a look at somebody else's. All right. So in this one, same thing, right? I'll blow it up a little bit. You can see in her sketchbook, she chose the word ocean. She ended up with the word sandcastle. She wrote it down, right? Got her connotations. And this is how she sort of organized her pictures a little bit, right? She ended up making one large background picture and then she took some other photographs. All right, so that was her original. All right, this is another one. Free trade was something that this person ended up starting with, and he landed on a word at the very end of his chain called symbiosis, right? And you know, things that have symbiotic relationships rely on each other. And so anyway, this is how his looked, right? These are his photographs, okay? And so on and so on. This is another one, sporting or adventure, ended up in extreme sports, okay? And nature ended up with the word seed. Okay, so here's some photographs that were for the inspiration. And I'm going to go ahead and end this video right here, and then the next part of it's going to explain the second assignment within Project 3, and that way it's easily broken up so that you can always go back to different explanations of the different portions of the assignments.